Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. This is Tony Ingraham, your host, and today this is being recorded on September 12th, and it'll be run for the next week. This is episode 20, and if you would like to see some of our other episodes we've had, you can go to my blog, which is called Walk in the Park, at ithacafingerlakes.com, and also tune in to on a schedule. This will first show on September 13th at 9 p.m. That's Thursday, and then on Saturday and Sunday at 10:30 in the morning each day, and then finally the following Tuesday at 8 p.m. Okay, so of course this is a time of anniversaries. We have the very sad anniversary, of course, of September 11th, which is yesterday from this recording. But there's another anniversary in our area, and that's the anniversary of the terrible flooding that we had on September 8th and September 7th and 8th last year. So I thought I'd run a video that I made at that time, and then also show some other pictures from the aftermath of the flood and so forth that you might find interesting. So this is a picture right here, actually, of Buttermilk Falls on September 7th, a year ago. Just bursting at the seams as Tropical Storm Lee came roaring up from Louisiana and just dumped all kinds of water on us. Not as much here as down along the Susquehanna River, but enough to definitely get our attention. So what I'm going to do is bring up a video here in a moment that will review that time. You're right with us here in a second. So I adjust the video.
Hello, my name's Tony Ingraham, reporting for Walk in the Park. This is September 8th, about 10:30 in the morning, and we're looking at Buttermilk Falls State Park and the effects of Tropical Storm Lee as it is pushed into central New York and dumped many inches of rain. I don't know how much. Well, I was here last night, and Buttermilk Falls was about the same height, but during the night it came up over the stream bank and onto the lawn and dumped a lot of logs and trash and other debris from the woods onto the lawn.
Yesterday evening, actually, the flow was a little more intense. Lucifer Falls in Robert H. Treman State Park was roaring as well.
Fishkill Creek next to the old mill in Upper Treman was reminiscent of the Great Flood of 1935 that tore out the dam and mill pond just upstream. Six-Mile Creek comes gushing out of the valley to the southeast of Ithaca right through the city. Fortunately, there are high walls here to keep it from spreading out, but I understood this morning along the route through town that some people were evacuated and others were woke up this morning around 6 o'clock or so, warned that there could be flooding in basements and so forth. I'm at 6 Mile Creek. It's late in the day on September 8th now, and I am by the intersection of Titus, South Titus Street and Plain Street, bridge over 6 Mile Creek. And neighbors here told me that early this morning the creek, which is obviously very high now, had jumped the banks even, and there's sandbanks over here, and it actually had extended beyond that. And it ripped out this soil and even the concrete slab foundation here of this access ramp into the creek bed. So all along the levee along here was, creek came up to it and some places jumped over it. This is Tony Ingraham on September 8th at Cascadilla Creek, where it comes down into downtown Ithaca. This is the Cascadilla Gorge or Cascadilla Glen during the aftermath here of the heavy rains from Tropical Storm Lee. And it's quite full, as you can see. It looks like it's going over the trail a bit, but there seem to be people still going up there. Now the Cascadilla Glen or Cascadilla Gorge Trail has been closed from Stewart Avenue up to Collegetown according to the Cornell Plantations website, and Cornell Plantations is the entity that owns and maintains the Cascadilla Glen Trail. Our gorges tend to amplify and dramatize the power of high water and floods, but they also tend to amplify, magnify the destructive power of the floods in the gorges. So one of the concerns, of course, with all of our lovely gorges around here is how will the trails fare? And regularly during events like this, our trails are ripped out, or bridges are washed out, or have their stone walls on them taken out, so that sort of thing. So this trail has already been half closed. What will happen the rest of it? And of course in the state parks like Robert Treman and Buttermilk Falls State Park, Watkins Glen, what will they look like after this storm?
Well, when I woke up this morning, I thought the first order of business was to check out my basement. My basement had about a foot of water in it. So I got the sump pump together and worked on that for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I'm sure it's going to be filling back up again, but at least I got the first influx outfluxed. And then I decided to take my bike around. I went over to Cascadilla Creek by the old PNC, and where we usually put a canoe in, the water's up several feet above that. And then I took my bike over to Ithaca Falls, and a whole lot of people were interested in what they saw there, and so was I. It was just roaring. I was going to go down and get closer because of all the trees being full. I couldn't see the whole fall, so I started walking down. But as soon as I got down to the bottom, there's the stream had expanded so much that it couldn't get any further than that.
And of course, all this water that's flowing out through the gorges and gushing across town has to go somewhere, and that, of course, is Cayuga Lake. So you can see behind me, there's lots of flotsam and debris, logs, garbage, all kinds of things that have been washed down from our gorges, our streams, and so forth, out into the lake here. And this is where some of it will settle, the mud and so forth, eventually, and actually extend the shoreline over a long period of time. And others of it will float around the lake for a while, and the big debris and so forth can be hazard for boats. But there's a lot of stuff we can't see that's in the water that comes down of our gorges and creeks and so forth. Things like runoff from parking lots and roofs and roads, and the chemicals that come off of automobiles and industrial facilities, and lawn chemicals and septic systems and sewage treatment plants, lots and lots of storm sewers, lots and lots of different sources of point and non-point source pollution, as they call it, that can get into Cayuga Lake. And the south end of Cayuga Lake here is really not the best quality water in the lake. Farther up, the water quality is better. But times like these are times that we need to remind us that what goes on in our watershed, what goes on our land, eventually will affect the lake and eventually may even get into the lake. This is Tony Ingraham reporting from Stewart Park, Ithaca, New York. Flooded.
Okay. So that's a look back at what we experienced a year ago. But what we experienced was high water, amazing power of the water, waterfalls and such. And some of us, like my friend Richie Holtz, had to pump out his basement. There was some trail damage in some of the parks. Robert Treman, its upper trail in the gorge by Lucifer Falls, had a major washout that actually didn't get fixed until the spring. But it's nothing like our neighbors to the south and to the east experienced, particularly along the Susquehanna River, which rose tremendously, and they got 2 or 3 times as much rain as we did here in the Ithaca area. So I thought I'd go down and just show you some pictures down in Owego. I went down there about 2 weeks after the big flood, where the whole downtown was flooded, because Owego's built right on the floodplain, right next to the Susquehanna River. And so the downtown and houses and so forth along there were flooded with several feet of water, and it did enormous damage. So here's downtown Owego. This is when most of the cleanup had already happened, and there was still tremendous amount of material. I guess the National Guard came in there and helped out. In fact, a friend of mine lives along the river there. He has an old historic home which was flooded, and he actually had to be rescued from a parking lot by a National Guard helicopter that lifted him up in the air and carried him off to dry ground. He ended up in a high school in Binghamton for a while before he got back home and began the long, laborious, expensive, overwhelming project of trying to get his home back together, and it took him months even to get electricity back. So we were very lucky here in the Ithaca area, but the folks down along the Susquehanna River had a hard time of it, and even perhaps worse than Owego, although it's probably not fair for me to say that. The Binghamton really was hit bad too. Again, built along the Susquehanna River, and the Shenango River comes in there as well, and they were heavily flooded. So here's some images I got off the internet. Downtown Binghamton flooded in September 7th and 8th flood. Here's a picture from FEMA showing downtown Binghamton. I don't know the individual landmarks, but and then here's a couple. That might be the Shenango River coming in there on the left. I'm not sure. But look how badly the city is flooded. I'm actually going to read you a report or an interpretation of the flood at that time by a guy named Dr. Jeff Masters. He's some kind of atmospheric scientist. I don't really know, but he writes a blog on the Weather Underground, and with one of the wildest weather years in U.S. history drawing to a close. He wrote this last December, December 14th, 2011. It's time to look back at some of this year's unprecedented onslaught of billion-dollar weather disasters and the lessons we should have learned. One of these disasters was the approximately $1 billion in damage due to flooding from Tropical Storm Lee, which brought torrential rains along a swath from Louisiana to New York in early September. Among the hardest hit cities was Binghamton, New York, where the record rains due to remnants of Tropical Storm Lee on September 8th brought a 1 in 200 to a 1 in 500 year flood to the city's Susquehanna River. So statistically, you'd only expect this maybe once in every 200 to 500 years. A flood 8.5 inches higher than the city's flood walls spilled over into the city that day, damaging or destroying over 7,300 buildings in Greater Binghamton and causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Damage to Binghamton's sewage treatment plant and the city infrastructure alone are estimated at $26 million and so forth. The total damage to the county Binghamton lies in Broome County in the downstream Tioga is estimated at $1 billion. I argue that there is strong evidence that the extra moisture that global warming has added to the atmosphere over the past 40 years could have been, quote, the straw that broke the camel's back, which allowed Binghamton's flood walls to be overtopped, causing tens of millions of dollars in damages. Had this event occurred 40 years ago, before global warming added an extra 4% moisture to the atmosphere, the Susquehanna flood would have likely stayed within the city's flood walls. So that's his contention, and building along the floodplain and the increased amount of water in the atmosphere with the heating of the oceans, a lot more water is 4%, as the climate scientists are telling us, end up in the atmosphere and comes out in storms. And another factor that was pointed out after Hurricane Irene is that the mid-Atlantic waters are warmer now, so they sustain the power of a storm as it gets farther north, and that's what happened with Hurricane Irene apparently as it plowed into New England, and particularly Vermont and eastern New York, and did so much damage as well. So some areas got them both. Eastern New York got both Irene and Lee. So we were lucky down here that we're not still recovering as these communities are. So now I'm going to go take a look at some of our gorges. This is well, on my shows I use a lot of images from a guy named Bill Hecht, who likes to get up in airplanes and take photographs, and he provides an incredible record and opportunity to see our local landscape, particularly all around Cayuga Lake, from the air. So this is looking at East Hill over Ithaca. Downtown Ithaca is at the bottom, and then Cornell is in the middle of the picture. And on the right-hand side, just right of center, you'll see this green swath coming down the hill. That's a gorge. That's Cascadilla Gorge or Cascadilla Glen, and that's run by Cornell Plantations, as I noted in that video. But on the other side, almost over to the edge, is Fall Creek Gorge. It forms pretty much the northern side, at least, of the historical Cornell campus. And the lower left center is Ithaca Falls area. So let's fly around in this same day with, it's actually earlier this month, probably last week, with Bill, looking straight down on Ithaca Falls. Now the lower left center, you can see a bridge. That's the Stewart Avenue Bridge going over Fall Creek Gorge, and to the right of that you can see the waterfall where it drops off and goes in the shadow, and the big basin below where people go. So let's go to there. And I was there last Friday, which was September 7th. That would be the anniversary of Tropical Storm Lee's onslaught in the area, looking at Ithaca Falls, and it's certainly not what it was a year ago. But here I have a short little video to share with you as I was there last Friday. So I'll get that up here, and let me see if I'm going to have to do some adjustments on that. I may or may not. Don't think so. Okay.
This is Tony Ingraham with Walk in the Park at Ithaca Falls. Lately, we've had some rain. Actually, I think it was yesterday, last night. But this summer, of course, the falls have been very dry. I actually haven't gotten up in here much this year, but it's nice to see some water on the falls at last.
Okay, so that's kind of what it is Now, although we had some rain on Saturday, that added more water to our gorges, and I frankly haven't gotten out to check and see how much higher they are, but they certainly are recovering from the really low water conditions we had earlier in the summer. So just for some levity, I'm going to go over to a county fair in Massachusetts. I visited some family over in Massachusetts, and one day we went to the Northampton Tri-County Fair. And one of the high points of the fair was the pig races. So I'm got a very short 30-second video here. I'll put you up. The small pigs race around a track here. So I'll get that up here in a second. I have to make some adjustments. Get it to fit the screen properly. All right. So it's Granny's Pig Races, as a woman, I guess, did that as a lark at some point, and it caught on, and it's very popular. So she goes from fair to fair doing Granny's Pig Races. I heard that they put out Oreo cookies in that basin that they all race around the track for. So they let them know there's Oreo cookies in there, and then they burst around the track, all those little piglets. So it was very cute in the county fair. So now we're going to go over to some of our local parks and see what's going on. This time we're going to go to Buttermilk Falls, Buttermilk Glen. This is sort of the upper end of the gorge along the trail there. And this on the right is a bunch of wildflowers you can see there now. They start off in midsummer and go through the fall. A little closer up on them. These are called, we have a couple of different names. They are yellow touch-me-nots or yellow jewelweed. Their actual scientific name is Impatiens pallida. And they're very common. They grow in sort of moist soils. They seem like a little sun. And quite common around here. And they often grow with, but they're more numerous than this one. This is closely related. Another wild impatiens or touch-me-not or jewelweed, which is called spotted jewelweed. So these are pretty flowers that grow along the trail, but they're called jewelweed because the leaves, if you stick them in water, you pick a leaf and you stick it in water, if there's some rain that's collected on it or something like that, it repels the water and it creates a silvery appearance underneath the bead of water. So they look like they're a jewelweed, sometimes called silver leaf. But I know them more as a what you call touch-me-not. So if you look at this picture here of the spotted jewelweed or spotted touch-me-not, look to the upper center, just right of upper center, you'll see this thing hanging down. Here's another one over here. These are the seed pods that form from the flower after it's been pollinated, and they, when they are mature, will burst upon touching. So that's why they call it touch-me-not. So it's kind of fun, and to go through the woods and find those things mature and swelling, and you're touching them, boing, and they'll pop all over the place. And if they're really mature, the little seeds in them are brown, and you taste them, and they have a chew them, a nutty flavor. I'm not endorsing them as a wild food. You should always double check with a proper authority on wild foods, but I and many other people have tasted these. So let's see, I was going to say something. Oh, here's one that's being pollinated. If you look at this insect right in the center, it looks like a bee, doesn't it? But actually it's not a bee, it's a fly, something called a hoverfly, which mimics a bee. And you can see markings on its abdomen. It's striped black and yellow markings. Resemble a bee, but it's not. And the way I can tell it's a fly particularly is the head, because it has those large fly eyes, compound eyes, which the bees and wasps and so forth don't have. And also flies, it's not that easy to tell looking straight at them like this. They only have 2 wings, whereas wasps and bees have 4. And diptera is the name of the order flies are in, which means literally in Greek, 2 wings. So that's kind of neat, being pollinated there. Jewelweed, touch me not. Oh, another thing is that the impatiens, it's, we mostly think of it as a garden flower, but here it is. These are 2 of our species of wild impatiens, and there's some 850 to 1,000 species of impatiens around the world. And so I was kind of tickled to find out that these were our native impatiens. So, well, we don't want to get too impatient, ha ha ha, but we're going to move on here. We just have a few minutes left. We're going to look at a couple of other locations. We'll stay in Buttermilk Glen. Let's go look at along the trail. This is up above, well, about halfway up Buttermilk Glen, an area that opens up from, well, if you climb up from the falls, and then there's an open area called Pulpit Falls, and then it narrows into these potholes, and then it opens up again to more waterfalls, and this is kind of neat. So I like that spot, so I took that picture. So, and then climbing up around what they call Pinnacle Rock, near the upper end of the Gorge Trail, coming up the rocks there, and then looking right at the waterfall on the right. Now, this has not got a lot of water on it, and this is typical of what we've had lately. And in fact, earlier last month, much of this ledge was dry. At least this has got water on it, but certainly not what we would have seen a year ago. What do I have here? Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is actually looking at that same waterfall from the little footbridge area just downstream from it. And we get some nice reflections in the water. Yeah. So a nice sort of abstract, arty sort of picture. And then right above those falls, 10 or 20 feet, is this strange pothole, which I've shown in other shows, but from a different perspective. And up to the right is the Pinnacle Rock, which I've shown in other shows and will again. But here's that strange pothole that I think is a remnant of the base of a waterfall, or a plunge pool from a waterfall that is long gone, but the hole that it polished out is still there. And look at this. Here's a little farther, just a little upstream from there. A lot of people have taken this picture. This is an amazing little spot of potholes or plunge pools polished out by the stream in the rock. And if you look over to the right of center there, you can see there's one that gives you a window on the sky as you look into the reflection. So a lot of neat stuff here. I can flip over to a few shots at Treman State Park. I'm running out of time here, but just some images in the upper gorge there. Taking a look at if you look in the back center there, there is the footbridge that crosses the gorge, and then going back along the trail, looking back to where the last picture was taken in the upper gorge slot from the upper picnic area there. See where we can go next. So here's looking back from that footbridge, and then down below the footbridge, there is this strange slot here created by what's called joints in the rock, and a guy fishing in the remnant of an old pothole that's in the joint from some long gone waterfall. Well, we're running out of time here, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time here. Just got to get up our final image, which is Walk in the Park. Come join us again next week.